Welcome to Third Space Live. I'm Jody Peel, and this is a show that offers conversations, ideas, and stories to build mental wellness. Today, our show is going to be all about men's mental health. But before I introduce our guests, Roxie and Jeff, I'm going to remind you that you can learn all about our charity, Third Space Life Charity, at thirdspacecanada.org. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and you can sign up for our newsletter as well on our website. I also wanted to do a quick shout out to Third Space Coffee, located in Landmark 2 in Kelowna, which is a social enterprise that supports this charity. Learn more and order safely online at thirdspacecoffee.ca. All right, today is June 2nd, 2020, at least our recording date, and this is show number 18. I'm really excited about this show because in this line of work, there's frequent discussion around men's mental health and that there's unique aspects to that. I just want to make sure that before we begin that we welcome people of all gender identities to be part of this conversation, and although we're going to be using gender binary language, that we're speaking from a place of inclusivity, and we hope that people who identify with whatever gender they may identify with will be able to participate in this conversation today. So before I introduce Roxie and Jeff, I want to tell you a little bit about the organization they represent. Connect Counselling and Therapy Society is located in Kelowna, British Columbia. You can learn more at connectcounselingsociety.ca. It's a nonprofit or a registered charity. Roxie can tell us more about that, here in Kelowna, that offers individual and group counseling to people in our community. They're a great organization, and we're related because we do the same kind of work. So I'm super excited to have them here. They're much bigger than we are, and they have a very robust men's program, which is fantastic. So the executive director of Connect Counselling is Roxie Van Eller. She's an experienced ED and registered therapist. She's passionate about mental health counseling for all people. She has an specific interest in anti-violence sector and trauma work. She really enjoys helping people overcome challenges that prevent them from leading their best lives. And she brings over 25 years of experience to her role at Connect Counselling. She has a master's degree in counseling psychology and specific training in trauma. Jeff Goreski, is that correct? I think so. He can correct us if he needs
Goreski.
to. Goreski, thank you. Has been facilitating men's groups in the community for over 15 years, most recently with Connect Counselling. He has facilitated at Connect a relationship group, rebuilding when your relationship ends group, and a trauma recovery group for men. He has a passion for helping men and supporting men to lead better and healthier lives. And he holds his post-baccalaureate in gerontology/health promotion, and has finished his coursework for his master's in that same area. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Roxie and Jeff to join us. Just pressing buttons and talking at the same time, not my forte. There we go. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jody.
So I think what we've decided when we were preparing for the show is to start with Roxie and maybe start the conversation around the special needs or considerations, I guess, in terms of men's mental health. And she can tell us a little bit more about her organization, programs and services to support local men. So she'll introduce us to the topic, and then we'll hand it over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about his experience supporting and working with men in therapy.
Great. So thanks again, Jody. So yes, Connect Counselling and Therapy has actually been around in Kelowna for 33 years. Some people might know it as the Kelowna Family Center. And basically, the society provides free counseling to the community. We provide counseling to men, women, children, seniors. We address depression, anxiety, trauma, parenting, couples counseling. So we have a broad range of programs, and we do quite a variety of groups as well. One of the reasons why I was sort of pleased when you approached us about talking about men's mental health, Jody, was I've been working in the anti-violence field, providing counseling to women and children who've experienced intimate partner violence for over 25 years. And right from the get-go, for me, I always wondered, when we talked about breaking the cycle of violence, how we were actually going to do that if we didn't include men in the conversation, right? Because you can see the impact that domestic violence has on women and children, and the trajectory that comes about when we're not really providing support to men and giving them the resources they need in order to make changes. One of the biggest things that I've always heard in the work that I've done is, you know, women love their partners and just want things to be different, to be healthier. And I've also had the privilege of working in groups with men who have been identified as people who've been perpetrators. And, you know, you see in those groups when men are given the opportunity to learn new ways and understand themselves better and find new ways of communicating, how that really changes who they are and how they want to be in the world. So it's always just been a really big passion for me to find ways to invite men into the conversation and support them.
That's great. So that actually is another layer or another aspect of this conversation. So there's the role of supporting men to build healthier relationships and behaviors. I know Jeff's going to speak specifically to the stigma around men seeking help and the prevalence of depression and suicide, unfortunately, in the male population. So I'm glad you also raised that perspective, Roxie. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the support services and programs that Connect Counselling offers.
Mm-hmm. So in particular, when we're speaking about men, we offer a variety of options. So we do have some free counseling where men can come in via referral from Interior Health, and they can get 6 free sessions of individual counseling. We've also been very excited because we've been able to offer men specific counseling around trauma. So if they as children experienced or witnessed any abuse, we also have some programming for that, and that is something that we do with the help of UR Collective. They've been supporting our trauma counseling, and we've been directing it towards supporting men, as well as, you know, through donations and some fundraising. So we often will have men come in via the short-term counseling program and then move them into something where they can do a bit more in-depth work. We also have 2 drop-in groups that we operate weekly, and Jeff will speak to one of them because he's a facilitator there. So we have those 2 drop-in groups, and we've just finished up a trauma group for men that we were fortunate to get funding through civil forfeiture, as well as we run periodically rebuilding groups for men, and those are groups for men whose relationships have come to an end and they're in a transition. And it's really looking at, how do you start moving forward? How do you grieve? How do you start, you know, building a new life for yourself once, you know, a significant relationship has ended?
That's great. That sounds phenomenal. And our community is so lucky to have Connect Counselling to offer all these things. Wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Roxie, before we speak to Jeff about what he does at Connect?
Yeah, sure. I was going to mention, I mean, I talked a little bit obviously about domestic violence, but really, you know, when we're talking about men's health, we talk about sort of the epidemic of suicide amongst men. I mean, women will attempt 3 to 4 times more than men, but men will actually complete 3 times more than women, right? And so those issues around depression, anxiety, where do you go for help? you know, difficulty with, you know, just being a husband, being a father, being a provider, looking at all the expectations that men have as well in terms of, you know, the role that they should play and how they should be, is difficult. And I think for men, and I'm sure Jeff, you will be able to speak to this, is the idea that the shame that comes up in having to ask for help really gets in the way of men coming forward, because as much as women are stereotyped and put in a box, so are men. There's a pretty narrow definition of male masculinity that we accept in society. So I don't know.
The barriers are complex. Men are socialized to be comfortable with that, or to be astute in those areas, or to seek help. It's and I know Jeff's going to talk about the nature of male friend groups is another role. There's so many barriers. So would it make sense then to introduce Jeff into the conversation? And yeah, maybe that's a great place to start, Jeff, talking a little bit about the barriers for men and why they don't seek help, or why it's tough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, typically, you know, men just have not been taught or conditioned, if you will, to seek help, right? We always have this stereotypical image of this, you know, stoic sort of male, you know, that, you know, nothing can go wrong, you know, everything's going good in life, and I can, you know, we can handle anything kind of mentality, right? Which has been
be the strong one and all that.
Yeah, which has been a very toxic stereotype, if you will. I mean, obviously, it was created under, you know, a patriarchal view of what it is to be a man, and it's done a lot of disservice to men, because first of all, if you know, as men, if we don't live up to that image, then, you know, our self-esteem takes a huge hit, right? So we're always comparing ourselves to that image of that, you know, stoic man who, you know, can do it all himself, right? And we're taught that that's the, you know, what we should be. But yet, you know, and as a group, you know, men certainly have a lot of, you know, privilege in our society and our culture. But as an individual, men aren't immune to shame. Men aren't immune to fear and guilt and anger and grief, loss, depression. You know, all of those things. We're human beings too. And, you know, when we're going through the ups and downs of life, you know, we're experiencing all of these, you know, inside all these feelings, and yet we have this, you know, image of what we're supposed to be like, and so we're comparing ourselves to that image constantly, right? And we're wondering, well, why aren't we that, right? I'm experiencing all this, and so, you know, naturally, and then on top of that, men again aren't conditioned really to seek help and reach out for help, and oftentimes men don't have the depth or the quantity of friendships out there. A lot of friendships, and we were talking about this earlier, with men, they tend to be in the workplace, right? And they don't necessarily have the quality, if you will, that you know, women might have with their friendships, right? And I'm not saying men don't have, you know, deep friendships or connections, but certainly they have less. And so, you know, men don't generally just, you know, kind of go out and hang out with their buddies and talk about, you know, how,
Their feelings.
you know, yeah, how difficult it is going through their divorce or separation, right? It's just not something that men generally have been conditioned to do. So they often suffer in silence, right? And so, you know, Roxie spoke about how men are more likely to, of course, complete, you know, suicide. Well, you know, that speaks to, I mean, you know, depression is a huge issue in men's mental health, and it's very undiagnosed, you know, like it's very underdiagnosed. There's probably a lot greater prevalence of depression in men, but because men don't talk about it, you know, how do we know about it, right? And but the higher suicide rate, if you will, would speak to that, right? Because if there wasn't, you know, really, you know, higher rates of, or sorry, if there were lower rates of depression amongst men, then you wouldn't see a higher suicide rate, right? So I think that's just a unfortunate outcome, obviously, of this, you know, not talked about and you know, not talked about suffering that men are going through with respect to depression.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, from my understanding too, there's so many different layers of shame and reluctance for negative impact by being open not only in their own home with their partner or their family, but within their community and within their workplace. It's all different layers of fear that by being open about a struggle, that there's somehow going to be thought of as less than, or it's going to create barriers for opportunities or success. I know that we had President Santa Ono from UBC speak at an event early this year, and he spoke to the idea that particularly in the workforce, a lot of people, men, don't seek help because they're afraid if someone finds out it could impact their career.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly that's a factor for sure. And also just because if you look at how, when men were, children at one point, boys, oftentimes if boys act out, express, any type of grief or sadness or whatnot, we're oftentimes, told to suck it up, right? That somehow, so we learn from a very young age that emoting isn't okay. It's not manly, if you will. And so what happens is that those repressed emotions, unfortunately, build up inside ourselves, and we hold on to it as anger, right? And so as we grow up over the years, the more we stuff down, the more anger builds up and resides within ourselves. And so then we're dealing with all this anger, but we often deal with it in unhealthy ways. We might, seek, alcohol or drugs or, you name it, gambling, there's so many different types of addictions and unhealthy, behaviors that men seek out, if you will, that, we get really disconnected from ourselves but we put on this, veil of anger oftentimes because, we haven't ever been taught, and this is why men's groups I feel are so important. We've never been taught or been given an opportunity or a place where it's safe to express our emotions, right? To learn how to express them, to process them, to understand them more, to understand ourselves more and why we feel the way we do. And to be given a safe space where, men can share their feelings with other men. Well, I can speak to my experience in terms of whenever I see a new man come into the group, they're oftentimes they're very, uncertain, and you kind of see the look on their face, like they're, wow, and then at the end of the group, they're like, wow, I didn't know this exists, right? I wish I knew about this long ago, because, again, men just don't think that they can do that with other men. I never say there is a magic bullet, if you will, but if there is one, I think it's truly the connection men experience with other men in that setting where, wow, I have a safe place that other men are going to listen to me, and I'm not gonna get shamed for it. I'm not gonna be judged for it. And so, in that group setting, men really can develop a deeper sense of empathy and compassion. And they also develop really great active listening skills, right? Because one thing we do is when a man's speaking, we listen and we practice that. So, that can really translate into, of course, or transfer into, their home life, their work life out in the community, right? Where those types of skills they can develop and grow in the group can come out into the community in their home, where, they're more empathetic, so when their child has a tantrum or something like that, they might be able to understand that a little more. And they're not necessarily projecting their anger out, and perpetrating violence in the home as often, because again, they understand their feelings more. They have a place where they can let their anger out and express it, in a safe way, where they're not going to be judged for it. And it's a place where men can see that they're not alone. Like, wow, that guy over there is going through the same thing as me, right? Because men think that it's just them, right? They really do. I mean, they often think that this is just me and what's going on for me, and they don't understand that a lot of men are experiencing the same thing. And I guess I've been around in the circles long enough to know that, every story is important, but there's a lot of times they're the same stories or very similar stories. It's remarkable, right? So, so it can be very, beneficial and of course therapeutic for men to be witnessed, right, and to witness other men.
You just talked about a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating, and each element of it could be a different conversation, different talk, but just correlating like this connection between men not being taught or socialized or encouraged to understand their feelings and process their feelings leads to things like addiction and violence and self-harm, and other things. So that's really important that you touched on that. Talked about parenting a little bit, that it's tough to be an emotionally intelligent parent if you don't have those skills yourself. And parenting is the most important factor to build healthy humans moving forward. We all know that. And then the other piece was the power of peer support and not feeling alone. So I'm curious around that, Jeff. Maybe that's the next thing we can talk about. How does this work? Because there's got to be a lot of men, particularly men, this is the first time they've reached out for help. Do you start in individual counseling or do you start in group, and how do you make that work?
Well, I think it's different for every man. I don't think, some men might feel more comfortable in a one-on-one setting because, especially if this is their first time being exposed to counseling, they might be very intimidated by being in a group setting, especially when the group setting is, all men, right? So my sense is a lot of men feel probably more comfortable speaking to a woman, in some ways, because, oftentimes, men, especially in relationship, when they're in relationship, are often taken care of, if you will, emotionally speaking, by their partner, right?
And
So they might,
mother figure in their life.
yeah, exactly. So they might feel safer with, speaking to a female, but, whether they end up in individual counseling with a female or male, or in group counseling, I think having individual counseling can certainly act as a catalyst towards more group-based counseling, right? But I've also seen men, come in the other way, where they want that experience with other men. They really truly, a lot of men really truly desire that connection with other men, right? Because the one thing we've been taught, again, through sort of a patriarchal view, is, we're supposed to compete with each other, especially in this type of economic system, right? Sort of a capitalist system. So, men can be very competitive, but to find real connection, over the last 100 years or so, men were pulled out. Men used to commune together. When we were largely an agrarian society, we were farmers and whatnot, we used to build things together. We used to go plow the fields together. We used to talk and hang out and raise our boys together, right? And our girls too. And, but we don't do that anymore. But instead, we're taught to compete. And, and again, we're trying to look at that image of what, being that all-powerful man, if you will, right? That we're, conditioned to believe that we're supposed to be. And so, we get into that headset, but, that's not the reality, right? I mean, we're human beings and we go through all these. And so having real connection with other men is so important to men that, we've been pulled away from since we, became an industrial and a technological society, if you will. We don't get that opportunity as much anymore to have those, real discussions and to really know each other well, right? And to have, just be human beings, if you will. Right.
So for someone who might be listening to the show and has never had an experience with counseling or with group work, could you spend a couple minutes talking about what they would expect if they are brave enough, courageous enough to reach out for help? What would that look like? From like how many people would be in the room, and how do you start the conversation? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we in the group on Wednesday nights that I facilitate, we have anywhere between, 6 and 15 guys. The room is only so big, so we can only house so many at once. But so typically men will come in and they'll sit down. We often start. I usually start, introducing, with introductions to welcome the new men. I'll welcome them by their first name. Everything is anonymous, of course, and confidential. I always say we can share our story outside of the circle, but we don't share another man's story. And that's really critical to get across at the very beginning, because again, men are so afraid of being shamed that, if I say something here is is my boss going to hear about this? Is my wife going to hear about this? Is someone else going to hear about this that I don't want to? They're afraid, right? So, and that often comes from the conditioning from, early childhood, of course, being told, boys don't cry, and, we don't, so, but anyways, I digressed, and I can get off
Well,
on.
this is all helpful. Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I often like to start off that, introduce the new men, welcome them, remind everyone it's confidential and anonymous. Usually we start with a short mindfulness exercise because men often tend to live here, and we really want to get them into here, right? And I'm trying to, there we go, our hearts,
Yeah.
right? To really speak from here, because men, if we can't get them into their hearts where they can be a little more present with what's going on, then they're not really tapping into their emotions, right? It's all the story that their mind's sharing, and the story is important to some degree, but really what's really important is the feelings, right? And getting men into that place where they're feeling their feelings so that they can express and feel safe to emote, of course, if they feel that during the group. So after a short mindfulness exercise where it's
Can
really
you
just
introduce the listener to quickly what a mindfulness exercise would look like for someone not familiar with it?
absolutely. So typically involves some sort of breathing exercise, just closing our eyes, and really just focusing on our breath and just paying attention to any type of sensations or emotions in the body to see what's coming up, watching our thoughts and being mindful of our thoughts, and just breathing during a short period of time, so we're really aware of what's going on in the inner world, right? Because we're often so focused on the external world, we don't go inward to really look at what's happening within ourselves. So by going through that, usually 5 or so minutes of mindfulness, just sitting and breathing and being, and looking inward, that helps men tap into what's going on, right? What's going on for me tonight? There's a reason why every man comes to the group, right? Every man, some men's, I mentioned this earlier, have very similar stories, and other men's are very unique and different, and they're all unique and different in many ways too. So, really, what is going on for me this week? What did come up? What did I expect? What challenges came up for me this week? What really positive things came up this week? I always say to men too, like, this isn't just a place to share your bad feelings, if you will. If you had some joy this week, share that, because that's such a gift to men too, to hear other men happy, right? Truly happy. That's often something that men don't do together either. So,
And
really,
happy about stuff that maybe they're not programmed to talk about being happy about. Maybe it's not about how much they're making or the big win at work. Maybe it's something softer.
yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, I had a great, bike ride with my son, this weekend. We had so much fun, and we got ice cream together, and things like that. Things that really, could resonate with other men, and so men can realize that there's, other things in life other than, like you said, how much money they make, or the promotion they got at work, or whatever it is, right? To just see each other as human being as opposed to just a worker, if you will.
Can
So
you
getting men.
also just speak for 2 seconds, sorry to interrupt there,
Yeah.
about, I would assume, but this is a question, I guess, and a statement at once, that there would be a diverse type of man that would be part of your group. I mean, it's not all a certain type of man. There'd be
No.
men from all walks of life and different types of jobs and
Yeah.
family situations. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Some people might feel like they wouldn't be a good fit because that's what we tend to do as humans.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, in all the men's group I've sat in over the years, not just as a facilitator, but as a participant. I mean, I've been doing this work for over 15 years myself. I mean, I've sat in circles with men of all different cultures and backgrounds. And I don't just mean ethnicity wise. I mean sexuality. We have gay men attend this group. We have men in different types of relationships. I know polyamorous relationships, and not just monogamous. So there's so many different types of men, if you will, coming to this group. There are men who are unemployed and underemployed. There are men struggling with addictions. There are men struggling with anxiety and depression. So, the common element, of course, is we're all men, and it's not about how we identify, if you will. So, you know, around what it's that it's a safe space, no matter what background what background we come from, if you will, no matter what our demographic makeup is, if you will. It's really just knowing that it's a safe space that we can all come together and again commune and share and empathize and relate and listen to each other. Yeah.
So because of the barriers we spoke about earlier, do you find that the men that end up coming for help at Connect are in a place of crisis? Do men wait until they're really hurting or sick before they reach out for help?
I want to say no, but it's not true. Yeah, oftentimes that is the case. I won't say that's always the case. I've noticed more and more, like, I think it used to be more and more the case, like men often do wait until it's not necessarily too late, but they're often in crisis when they arrive or have been through some sort of breakup or hardship before they come seek help. What I'm seeking more and more is that men nowadays are becoming more proactive in getting and seeking help, because, you know, and I say this during the groups oftentimes is, and this is why it's so important to share our joy and happiness too, right? Is so men who are in crisis can see the reflection of, you know, there are men out there who have been through things, but their lives are okay, right? And you too can get through whatever it is you're going through, right? And it's such a gift for other men to have just men who aren't necessarily in crisis be there to support them, so they see how important it is to other men's mental, you know, health and well-being, if you will, right? And so, you know, that will keep them. Like, I have men who, you know, I'm like, you should be facilitating this group, like, and they're just there because they want to support other men, not because they're necessarily experiencing some crisis, right? But yeah, certainly, oftentimes new men who do come in, they're usually going through something that's very difficult and challenging for them, emotionally speaking, and mentally as well, probably too, right? Whether it's a separation or divorce, or, you know, maybe they are experiencing some sort of issue with addiction, maybe they're suffering from depression or anxiety. But there's often men who, just like I said, want to proactively seek out other men to feel that connection with other men and commune with other men, right? To feel a sense of belonging, if you will.
Do you have any other thoughts or ideas around that gigantic barrier that so many men feel is between them and getting help, in terms of making that easier or less scary to reach out?
Oh, that's a $1 million question right there, for sure. I wish I knew the answer to that. You know, what I will say is, I think the more men that do get involved who can role model and be healthy role models for other men, I think that is a right step in the right direction. You know, because men need to see other men doing this, right? So promoting, if we can promote that more in the community, that there are these groups, men are seeking help, and men are being involved and proactive in taking care of themselves, right? This is really about taking responsibility for my life as a man, right? And really understanding myself more. And you know, so more and more, if we can model that to other men, especially to our boys, our children, you know, to say, hey, it's okay. Like, I have two sons of my own, right? A 20-year-old and a 7-year-old. And, you know, I'm always speaking to my son about, you know, especially my older son, about this type of work, so that he knows it's okay to go out there and, you know, ask for help, right? You know, he doesn't always want to talk to me because I'm his dad. So you know, I'm always very, you know, aware of that. So I always want to make sure, like, hey, you know, go get the help you need. If you need help, you know, if I can't give it to you, you know, then find it. And I know lots of groups, you know, all around BC. So it's, you know, there's help out there for everyone, not just my son.
I guess that raises two more points from my end. One is that I find it ironic and sad that too often I know a man in my life who I know has a lot of baggage from his upbringing, and the way he was parented wasn't very helpful, and yet he's raising his children that way. As opposed to, hey, you know, you don't have to do that. How to work for you. And maybe you need to learn some skills to stop
Yeah.
the cycle now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, often men are, you know, men who are perpetrators of violence are often, you know, victims of violence of their own when they're, you know, growing up or whatnot, or neglect, whether it's physical abuse or neglect or whatnot.
Or
But they've
depression or alcoholism or those cycles. Yeah.
absolutely they could have some, you know, relational trauma. You know, there's lots of different reasons why, you know, men end up in that unhealthy, toxic sort of masculinity, and then end up, you know, perpetrating onto their partners or children. Absolutely. But
I
yeah,
know
I
that
mean,
as a parent that I was more motivated by my love for my children to deal with some of my stuff and get healthier,
yeah.
even if I wouldn't do it for myself. So that's kind of a neat message to include in the show, is that if not for yourself, maybe you love your kids enough.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and that's one reason why I certainly do it for myself. I mean, and I haven't even, you know, I'm not, and I still have lots to work on. I mean, you know, um, my partner could attest to that. Yeah, yeah. Um, but you know, we're all work in progress, right? I mean, you know, it's not. There's no quick fix. Often people think, well, I'll just go and, you know, go to a few counseling sessions or something, and I'll get it all sorted out. You know, life has challenges and it's constantly changing and evolving, and, you know, this is something that, you know, men need to include as part of their self-care routine, right? This is why I'm in it, you know, like 15 years later. And yeah, I facilitate the group, but I also share during the group, right? Because I am a man and I want men, you know, to feel safe and comfortable with me too. And so, you know, having that connection with men, I think is really important. And you know, I think, you know, by having, you know, more men out there, and, you know, men sharing that with each other and telling each other about it. And, you know, it's certainly employers or workplaces, leaders there, managers, whoever, employers could certainly be very helpful in terms of promoting these type of programs for men, especially in, you know, male dominant industries such as maybe like mining, or, you know, those types of, or construction or things like that, where, you know, there can be, you know, some toxic behavior in some of those industries and whatnot. Like, you know, so having employers involved and talking and speaking about it too, and letting men know that, hey, yeah, you know, if you're hurting, like, you know, there's resources, you know, here's the
That's
resources in the community.
super important. Yeah, particularly for men. Um, the workplace environment is such a huge part
Yeah.
of the barriers. Um, and to have a work culture that invites people and makes it safe for people to be open and honest about their mental health or what's going on in their life,
Yeah.
is super important for men because of all the reasons you've already spoken about, more so maybe than even women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we spend so much of our time at the workplace, and you know, if we don't have a culture that supports our mental well-being, then it's just going to create more problems down the road for ourselves, right? It's just going to add to the, you know, layers we're already dealing with of all the, you know, pent up emotion that we haven't, you know, learned to, you know, express in a healthy way and really understand and process, right? It's just going to build up even more. But yeah, knowing that, you know, if men can get that message, that it's okay to talk about it, and that really needs to come from people who have some influence, if you will, over, you know, men, if you will, and definitely the workplace could be a big place of influence in terms of
Great opportunity
promoting.
for a leader in the workplace,
Yeah.
whether it's the boss himself or herself or
Yeah.
your manager or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good
Exactly.
opportunity for leadership that you were speaking to earlier.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. I think there was one more thought that I was hoping you could comment on. What do you see the benefits to men of doing this work? Because it's hard. It's hard to get there, and then it's hard to do the work. What can they look forward to as by getting help and working on themselves and getting healthier?
I think there's just immense benefit to it. You know, I alluded to this a bit earlier around this, some of the skills men develop. We you know, certainly develop a lot more empathy, I think, for other people, because we learn to really truly listen to other people. And so, you know, that skill of empathy, if you will, I don't even know if it's a skill. I think it's inherent in all of us, right? But I think oftentimes as men, because we're not sharing our feelings, we can become less empathetic. And so, you know, remembering to practice empathy in our day-to-day lives, that's a huge skill, a huge benefit to men, right? That's only going to improve their relationships with not just their family, you know, their partner, their children, but their colleagues at work, as well as their neighbors in the community, right? So that's a huge thing. Active listening, of course, you know, learning, just listening to other men and really hearing them, and not, you know, not interrupting, you know, and not just you know, reacting to everything everyone's saying, but really truly listening to what the other person is saying. That's a huge benefit, of course, as well as just knowing, you know, in terms of the benefit, knowing that other men are listening to me, that I feel heard. I mean, that's, you can't measure that, you know. A lot of men, you know, have gone through this on their own. They haven't talked to anybody, so they think nobody cares about me. Why would I, you know? So really, you know, seeing other men have empathy for me, you know, or, you know, as a man, that's huge. That's a huge gift, right?
I can't imagine.
Knowing I'm not alone.
Yeah, without that. I mean, I know a lot of women have groups of friends that they can talk to about all these things. It's part of the way we're socialized. Women tend to get together and talk about feelings. They talk about their kids. They talk about issues in their home like this. And I can't imagine, it's so tough navigating life with that. I can't imagine what men go through not having that all the time to lean on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of men are certainly suffering in silence, and they don't know, you know, what to do about it, and they don't know where to go to get help, and they don't even know that there is help out there. I know when I started into this 15 years ago, I was going through my own separation with my older son's mom, and you know, I mean, granted, there's more nowadays in terms of resources like Connect Counseling, but you know, back 15 years ago, I mean, I was living in Vancouver at the time. I had to Google, I had to Google men's group, anything, you know, like, and it was very difficult. Fortunately, I found an organization, which was great, but it took me a lot of time to just try to find something on Google that I felt could help me, right? Because I knew, I'm like, I can't be the only man going through you know, difficulties that needs help. So, you know, I know and just trying to, you know, bring that out more, and to really, you know, bring the resources to men, if you will, so that they know and are aware that there is help out there for them, and it's okay to seek out help.
Yeah, so there's what, 3.5 billion men.
Yeah.
Chances are that's how I live my life. I realize if I have an experience, it's likely there's about 4 billion other people or 7 billion other people that are going through the same thing. It's crazy that we do that to ourselves, that we feel so alone when it's the data speaks for itself. This is something that so many men struggle with and are living with. It's not just you.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, you know, my passion is to support men and living, you know, healthier, more conscious life, if you will, and purposeful life. And you know, I'm thankful for all the men's groups I've been in. I know, you know, I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for some of the men's groups I've sat in, because, you know, I've gone through my own, you know, challenges in life, and having that support has been so crucial for me in my life. I know how valuable, and that's why I think Roxie invited me, because she knows that I really understand the value in, you know, the benefits in terms of being involved in a men's group, not just as a facilitator, but as a man, and as somebody who's participated in them for quite a number of years too.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen and I've heard from the men who actually access our services is unless they're being identified with like a mental health issue and being put in a little box, there are no resources. And one of the things that's been really, really important to me is when a guy calls, okay, you know, there's no hoops to jump through, you know, here's what we're offering, you decide what you're comfortable with, and we're here to support you. We want to make it as easy as possible with the least amount of barriers. We actually have a Monday night men's group, which is co-facilitated by a, you know, male-female led group. And what was really interesting was just before COVID struck, we actually had guys in the drop-in group that we had to turn away. So we had so many men starting to come forward looking to get support that we literally didn't have enough room to accommodate them. And my hope is, despite the fact that, you know, we've got COVID going on here, that men will reach out. And, you know, we are running a campaign right now through Trellis, Men Matter Too, and we're really hoping to get, you know, Jeff talked about employers and, you know, where men are employed, construction companies, architectural companies, you know, anywhere men, you know, where men congregate to support the campaign, so we can really reach out and we can really provide whatever men need, right? Just to be here, to be available, and just to say, yep, you've reached us, okay, you know, we've got you. So make it as painless as possible.
Such a great cause, an important cause, and a great fit, particularly in male-dominated work cultures, for a funding opportunity, for sure. Mm-hmm. That makes me sad that you are limited with your capacity because of that. So hopefully someone will be watching the show and help out and make that happen.
I was going to say that's where Zoom comes in, because, you know, you're not limited to room size, which is fantastic. And yeah, I mean, Jeff has done such a great job, you know, facilitating the Wednesday night group. And I know that JB and Liz there, they do a phenomenal job. And so we're really just here to support the other 50% of the population in terms of just reaching out and getting the support they want. I have to say a lot, I work in the evenings and sometimes I, you know, see some of the men come into group, and so many of them will come in and just say, you know, thank you. Thank you for just providing this opportunity, because we didn't know where to go before, and we're really glad that we can come here. And that just is, that's what it's all about, right? Is just making a difference in the community, making us healthier, making us stronger. Yeah.
That's fantastic. We could talk all day about this. I'm passionate about this as well. I have two older teenage sons and a husband and a brother and a father. And yeah, this is great stuff and so important at the foundational level of our community's mental health. So hats off to you guys. Men who are watching, or anybody else who's watching that wants to learn more, they can reach out to Connect Counseling. That's a great place to start. And then you guys can take it from there. Are there any last words before we head off?
No, just thank you for the opportunity, Jody. This was really just fantastic to kind of let people know, or especially men in our community, know that, you know, there is help. We're here. Give us a call, send us an email, whichever you feel more comfortable, and we'll make sure that you get the support you need.
Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, men, come join us. You know, I can only speak to it personally, what it's done for me. You know, you want to improve your communication skills and improve your relationships out there. This is a great way to do it. You know, you're not alone, and you know, there's help there for you. And you know, it's a safe space. Just come on out and you know, share.
That's great. And as you both know, Third Space Charity counsels post-secondary students, and half of them are men. So we'll make sure that we let students in our community as well know about these men-specific programs and services, because yeah, what I've learned today is there's a whole bunch of added benefits, men supporting men, and that fraternity of types of connection. So that's important for everybody. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to thank you both once again for speaking with us today. I'm going to remind our viewers that you can learn more about Connect Counseling at, I'm going to look it up, connectcounseling.ca.
Connect Counselling Society.ca.
Society.ca. Great. And you can also learn about Third Space Charity at thirdspacecanada.org. Stay tuned Tuesdays and Thursdays for our shows on Facebook and Instagram at 8 p.m. I hope you both will come back and join us again, talk again about more mental health related topics. Great. So thank you to everybody for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Great.
Thank you, Jody.
Take care, everybody. Bye for
Bye-bye.
now.